Greetings, this is Dr. Bill Bailey, and this is VirtZine. VirtZine is the online magazine of virtualization and cloud computing, so I'm glad you can join us for this edition of VirtZine. Been a while since we've had a VirtZine Netcast, a very long while. We've got months worth of news to share with you about virtualization and cloud computing, so let's get right to it. We are proud members of the Tech Podcast Network, techpodcast.com. If it's tech, it's right here on VirtZine. Also, we are proud members of the International Association of Internet Broadcasters, so I want to encourage you to take advantage of all these opportunities to get good netcasts and podcasts. I like to call them netcasts because podcast sounds like you're limiting it just to iPods, but netcast, that's more inclusive, and I like being inclusive on things like that. All right, so go out and check other Tech Podcast members and International Association of Internet Broadcaster members and their netcasts as well. All right, let's look at what we have here on VirtZine. Get ready for containers. Now, I've been saying for a long time that container-based computing is going to get bigger and bigger. And I have water here. You may hear my bottle popping. But I've got to drink water while I'm doing the show or my throat will dry out. Not a good thing for that to happen. So anyway, containers. This was posted in April. Like I said, it's been a while since we've had a show. It says, earlier this week, VMware announced that 2 open source projects based on container technology. Project Photon is a lightweight Linux distribution designed for running containers, and Project Lightwave is an organization and management tool built on technology from Pivotal. This, plus Microsoft's recent announcement of Windows Server Nano with container support, sends a clear message about the future. Containerization is here. And it, along with a raft of other technologies such as configuration management, will be coming to your data center environment sooner rather than later. So you need to start looking into container technology, the ability to have the hypervisor linked or connected into, plugged into the application so that the application becomes portable. You just move it wherever you want to as a container. Okay, so very useful. Now, virtualize your domain controllers. This is a little bit controversial. I know I've got a friend at work that he argues against doing this, but it's time to let go of your physical domain controllers in the Microsoft world. You need to go ahead and virtualize them. And this article from Virtualization Review by Rick Vanover says, there was a time when it was considered taboo to virtualize critical applications, but that time has long since passed. I don't care whether it's database, Exchange, domain controllers, whatever, you can basically virtualize anything. And one of the things that people have been loath to virtualize is Active Directory domain controllers, but it's actually quite easy. And at work, we even recently P2V'd, physical to virtual, P2V'd basically a domain controller that was dying. It was going belly up hardware-wise, but it actually, the build was fine, so we just P2V'd it, and it's now virtual. And my buddy at work was a little nervous about that, but I said, don't worry about it, it's okay. And so basically in this article, there are a lot of good recommendations for considerations concerning domain controllers being virtualized. So I encourage you to check that article out on VirtZine. VirtZine is VirtZine.com, as it says there on the screen. All right, let's move on because we have a lot of information we need to get through. Docker. Now, you've heard me talk once again about Docker. Docker is a type of containerized system, and I've been predicting it's going to be big for a long time. Well, that day is getting closer and closer to ubiquitous use of Docker. At DockerCon 2015 last week, and as I said, this is July, so this is a little out of date, it was very clear that Docker is poised to transform enterprise IT, which is what I've been saying. While it traditionally takes years for software innovation, and especially an open source one, to reach the enterprise, Docker is defying all the rules. Analysts expect Docker will be the norm in enterprises by 2016, less than 2 years after the 1.0 release. That's pretty impressive. Yelp, Goldman Sachs, and other enterprises are using Docker. These enterprises have been able to take full advantage of the revolutions in virtualization and cloud computing without containerization. Now, At DockerCon last week, it was very clear that Docker, as I said earlier, was going to transform IT. Well, how are they doing that? They're doing that with this containerization, as I mentioned. The ability to take a standard container, move it across traditional vendors like VMware, Cisco, public cloud platforms like Amazon Web Services, whatever. Basically turn your entire application suite that you're providing with your virtualization platform and turn it into a container and dock it into whatever virtualization platform is available. That makes it portable. It makes it easy to move from one vendor to another. Pretty neat, all right? Well, as I said, I got a lot to cover, so I'm going to continue here. Microsoft steps up, Citrix gives up, and VMware is still king. Citrix is now a niche player in server virtualization, and VMware is still king of the hill, but Microsoft is making headway, especially because it comes with the OS. In other words, people are considering HyperV, Microsoft's virtualization, because it comes with free with the operating system. When you buy Windows Server, operating system, you get HyperV. All right. So a lot of people are considering, well, hey, it's free. Why don't I try to use it? Now, it's also true that there are other free virtualization platforms out there, but people also look at it this way. Microsoft is a big company. They support Hyper-V, so maybe it's less risky for people to try Hyper-V. So that's the reason I think there's been a bump in Hyper-V experimentation, shall we say. But VMware is still the big dog, which I'm happy about because I'm a VMware guy. And so they still have the vast majority of the market share. Now, Citrix with Zen Server has had a little bit of a penetration into the virtualization server hypervisor world, but they really, they pretty much are giving up on it. It just hasn't had the huge amount of market share that they really have needed, and so they're scaling back on it. Not saying they're giving it up entirely, but they are scaling back on it, and I think most people realize that, so they're not really throwing anything into that basket. Now, along those lines, Mark Templeton, who is the CEO of Citrix, has announced his retirement. Now, it's the second time he's announced his retirement, second time he's retired. He left, came back, but he has been running Citrix since 2001, a long time. And he joined Citrix 20 years ago as vice president of marketing, and he was elevated to president and was handed the reins 3 years later. Under his stewardship, profits grew enormously, but in the last few years, Citrix has begun to struggle badly. Like I said, their virtualization hypervisor, Zen Server, has been losing some market share, and even Zen App has begun to lose some market share a little bit because people are switching over to VDI, and VMware View VDI is now gaining market share, and Citrix Zen Desktop VDI is losing market share. So in some ways it doesn't look all that good for Citrix, but I'm sure it'll be around. They have good products, they have good support, and so I'm sure they'll be around. So that's interesting to watch. So we'll keep our eye on Citrix and see what happens there. Now, will VMware buy EMC? Now, I know some of you are scratching your head and say, wait a minute, Dr. Bill. VMware is owned by EMC. Why would VMware buy EMC? They're buying out, at least they've offered to buy out, their owner, if you will. In other words, EMC has more shares in the company than anybody else, so for all intents and purposes, they own VMware. Well, VMware now is talking about buying EMC. They put in an offer to their parent company, and EMC is considering it. Now, that's interesting. Data storage and IT giant EMC is contemplating a deal under which it would be acquired by VMware. Now, that ought to tell you something about how popular VMware is, how big VMware is, how profitable VMware is, that it could turn around and buy the people that initially bought it some years back. That's pretty impressive. So we'll stay tuned to that one too. I'll be very curious to see what happens if VMware buys EMC. What are they going to do with it? How are they going to work that whole scenario out? We'll watch that, all right? Well, I'll tell you what, that's it for this time. Join us again for the next edition of VirtZine. And remember until then to keep your head in the cloud.